Okay, let's get into this. When you think about prisons, you probably picture, cold bars, really cramped cells.
Yeah, the standard image. Bleak.
Exactly. But imagine something else for a second. Private rooms, maybe with a TV, a desk, even their own bathroom.
Sounds very different.
And picture people serving time, but cooking together in communal kitchens or using a gym, maybe reading in a library.
Okay, that's not the usual picture at all.
Right. This isn't some, fantasy. It's actually happening in some Norwegian prisons. So today, on the deep dive, we're going behind those, well, surprisingly unprison-like walls. We want to understand Norway's approach to incarceration because it seems fundamentally different.
And what's really striking, I think, is the philosophy behind it all. It's this deep belief in rehabilitation and not just paying lip service to the idea.
Yeah.
We're drawing today on a really fascinating firsthand account. Someone actually spent a whole day inside one of these prisons.
A full day. Wow.
Yeah, so it gives you this incredibly detailed view, how this whole philosophy actually works day to day for both the inmates and the staff.
Absolutely. And look, the reason you should really care about this, why it matters, it's pretty stark. Globally, we're facing a genuine crisis in our prison systems.
Definitely.
Just look at the U.S. The incarceration rate in 2023 was, 639 per 100,000 people? It's huge.
Staggering number. And it leads to massive overcrowding, stretched resources.
And that cycle of reoffending, the recidivism, it's so hard to break. In the U.S., rates are something like 60 to 75% within 5 years.
Yeah.
People getting out and ending up right back in.
And it's not just the U.S., right? Brazil, South Africa.
Yeah.
Many countries are grappling with these really deep-seated problems.
Exactly. So when you see a country like Norway operating on completely different principles,
Yeah.
apparently getting very different results,
Right.
well, you have to pay attention.
It really brings us to the core question, doesn't it? Could Norway's methods, which seem pretty radical to some, offer a real path forward? Or at least, some crucial lessons for prison reform around the world?
That's the heart of it. That's what we're diving into today.
So this philosophy in Norway.
Yeah, let's unpack that. The core belief, it seems almost deceptively simple.
Mm-hmm.
Treat people in prison like human beings. The idea is that this significantly boosts their chances of actually rejoining society successfully.
It sounds simple, but it's a massive departure from the purely punitive models you see elsewhere, isn't it?
Totally. A fundamental shift.
Instead of just focusing on punishment, deprivation, control, the focus shifts. It's about fostering dignity, a sense of normalcy.
And those private cells you mentioned,
Yeah.
with the TV, the desk, the bathroom.
Right. It's not about luxury, let's be clear. It's about providing a basic level of respect, creating an environment where someone can actually, reflect and maybe work on themselves.
Yeah, it's hard to focus on positive change if you're constantly stressed and feeling degraded.
Exactly. And dignity is key to that.
And it goes beyond just the individual cells, right? These communal areas seem really important too. The kitchens, gyms, libraries, even green spaces.
Oh, absolutely vital. They're deliberately designed, it seems, to support both physical and mental health holistically.
So it's about interaction, rebuilding social skills.
Precisely. These shared spaces encourage cooperation, communication, things that are essential for reintegration. It sort of mirrors life outside prison walls.
Makes the transition back less jarring, I suppose.
That's the idea. And think about the scale, too. Norway has roughly 4,000 inmates across about 33 facilities.
Yeah.
The occupancy rate in 2024 was around 90%.
So not the extreme overcrowding you see elsewhere.
Not at all. And that smaller scale, you have to assume, makes this kind of approach more feasible. It allows for more individual attention, maybe.
Makes sense. Okay, so that's the philosophy. How does it actually work on the ground, day to day? What are the key elements?
Well, one of the absolute cornerstones is the staff training. It's quite different.
How so?
Prison officers in Norway, they're not just security. Their training includes social work principles, conflict resolution, communication skills.
So more than just keys and handcuffs.
Much more. The main goal is to build trust, foster positive relationships with the inmates. It's proactive, trying to de-escalate tension before it boils over.
That creates a safer environment for everyone, presumably, staff and inmates.
That's the aim, a safer, more rehabilitative atmosphere. It's less us versus them.
Right, moving away from that purely authoritarian model.
Yeah.
And then there's education. That seems huge, too.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Something like 80% of inmates are actively involved in education programs.
80%, that's high.
It really is. And it's a wide range. Vocational training, think carpentry, IT skills, right up to university level courses.
So equipping people with real skills for when they get out.
Exactly. Giving them a pathway to a stable job, a stable life, trying to break that link between unemployment and crime.
And it's not just about jobs, is it? What about mental health?
Yes, that's another major pillar. Counseling, therapy. They're readily available in pretty much all facilities.
There's an understanding there, then, about underlying issues.
A clear understanding. Many people in prison have histories of trauma, addiction, mental health struggles. Addressing those root causes is seen as absolutely essential for real rehabilitation.
You mentioned Vaste Prison earlier, the prison island. That sounds pretty unique.
It really is. Baste is a low-security facility, and it's a fascinating example of pushing the boundaries.
How does it work?
Well, inmates live in shared houses, not cells. They work on a farm, they go fishing, they have a lot of daily responsibilities.
So learning responsibility through doing.
Exactly, fostering independence, community. It feels much less like an institution and more like a small self-sufficient village almost.
That's a world away from traditional high-security
A
prisons.
complete contrast to the isolation and rigid control you often find, yeah.
Okay, let's bring this even more to life. That first-hand account from Halden Prison, often called the world's most humane. What really stood out from that visit?
Probably the first thing, the most surprising thing, was just the general atmosphere.
Calm.
Yeah, remarkably calm, even during something routine like breakfast prep in a common area. There was this sense of almost collegiality between the inmates and staff, not the tension you'd expect.
That speaks volumes about the underlying dynamic, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests trust, respect, things often missing elsewhere.
And what about that woodworking class? That sounds like a tangible example of the rehabilitation focus.
It was incredibly telling. You see people genuinely absorbed in making furniture, taking real pride in their work.
Yes.
Exactly, purpose and skill. And there was this specific anecdote shared, an inmate doing time for theft. He found real hope, a sense of a possible future, by learning carpentry.
That's powerful. Shows how these opportunities can really change someone's outlook.
Absolutely. It
Right.
can spark possibility where maybe there was only despair before.
And beyond the skills training, they also witnessed a counseling session.
Yes, an anonymized one, focused on anger management.
What was the takeaway there?
The therapist's approach, it was described as really empathetic, understanding. It just reinforced that focus on getting to the root causes of behavior, not just managing the surface level.
Helping people understand their own triggers, their own patterns.
Exactly, working through the underlying issues that might have led them there.
Even small details, like the communal lunch you mentioned, a hearty stew, they seem part of this bigger picture of normalcy.
They really are. Things like eating together, having access to a gym, a library.
Keeps people connected to normal life.
Yes, helps maintain physical and mental well-being and keeps routines going that resemble life outside. It stops that complete detachment that makes reintegration so hard.
And the music workshop you mentioned, another example.
Yeah, another example of purposeful, collaborative activity, fostering creativity, positive interaction.
And all this happens without obvious bars on windows, no visible shackles. That sounds strange for a prison.
It does, doesn't it? But security is still paramount, of course.
How's it maintained then?
Through less visible means, discrete cameras strategically placed, highly trained staff, skilled in de-escalation, and crucially, that culture of mutual respect we talked about.
So security through relationships, not just hardware.
That's a good way to put it. Building a secure environment through community and understanding rather than just physical restraint.
Okay, this all sounds, well, very positive, very humane.
No.
But the crucial question is, does it actually work? What does the evidence say about reoffending?
And this is where it gets really compelling. Norway's recidivism rate is remarkably low.
How low?
Around 20% within 2 years. That's based on a 2024 Nordic prison study.
20%, wow. Okay, compare that for us.
We'll look at the UK. Their rate is roughly 50%, and the US, as we said, around 60%, maybe higher.
So 20% versus 50 or 60? That's a massive difference.
It's a dramatic difference. It strongly suggests that something fundamental in Norway's approach is effective in reducing reoffending.
And you shared that story, Arn's story. Convicted of a serious crime young, spent time in Halden.
Yes, Arn's experience is a powerful illustration. Convicted of murder at 19, spent 10 years in Halden.
And what happened after?
He didn't just serve time. He got a carpentry certification, crucial therapy, built a support network.
And now?
Now he runs his own construction business, has a family. His life was completely transformed.
That's incredible. And you're saying this isn't just a one-off miracle.
According to the reports, no. These kinds of positive transformations, while perhaps not always that dramatic, are apparently quite common within their system. It shows the potential for genuine change.
Of course, no system is perfect. There must be criticisms, challenges.
Absolutely, and it's important to acknowledge them.
What are the main ones?
Well, a common argument you hear is that it's simply too lenient, that it doesn't act as enough of a deterrent for serious crime.
The punishment aspect is seen as too weak.
Some argue that, yes. Then there are valid questions about scalability.
Can this model work anywhere else?
That's the question. Norway is, relatively small, fairly homogenous culturally, and has a very strong welfare state, a robust social safety net.
Factors that might not exist elsewhere.
Exactly. Critics argue those unique conditions are crucial to Norway's success and might be very hard, maybe impossible, to replicate in larger, more diverse countries with different economic situations.
And what about the cost? It sounds expensive.
It is. That's another significant point. Halden, for example, the annual cost per inmate is around $60,000 US.
$60,000. How does that compare?
It's roughly triple the average cost per inmate in the US.
Triple. Okay, that's a huge difference. It's a barrier, surely.
It's definitely a significant upfront investment, but the counter-argument is crucial here.
Which is?
You have to consider the potential long-term savings if recidivism is dramatically lower.
Fewer repeat offenders means less crime, fewer police resources needed, fewer court cases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lower costs for law enforcement, the judicial system, less victimization. It saves society money in the long run. So it becomes a question of investing now versus paying more later.
Right. Upfront cost versus long-term societal benefit.
That's the calculation they seem to be making.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what's the main thing, the key takeaway you think people should hold on to about Norway's prison system?
I think the core idea is this. By prioritizing the humanity of the people inside the system, Norway is aiming to reintegrate them, to help them become contributing members of society again.
Not just isolating them as permanent outcasts.
Precisely. It's framed as a long-term investment, really. In the individual, yes, but also in the community as a whole.
And it really throws down a challenge, doesn't it? Back to that question we started with. Does Norway's approach force the rest of us globally to rethink our own ideas about prisons?
It absolutely does. It compels us to look hard at the long-term benefits of investing in real rehabilitation, even if the initial price tag looks high.
It forces a conversation about what justice really means, maybe. What the ultimate goal of locking people up should actually be.
Exactly. Punishment, incapacitation, or something more constructive.
Definitely gives you a lot to think about. A powerful reminder that maybe, just maybe, there are more effective and ultimately more humane ways to deal with crime than just focusing purely on punishment. And speaking of looking at things differently, make sure you join us next time. We'll be doing a deep dive into Finland's really innovative education system.
Oh, that'll be fascinating, too.
It should be. Thanks for joining us today on The Deep Dive.